Good evening. Welcome to the January 3rd, 2017 meeting of the Milford Planning and Zoning Commission. If I could ask everyone at this time to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May we please have roll call from left to right?
Richard Lutz.
Mike Dolan.
John Grant.
Carl S. Moore.
Scott Marlowe.
Tom Nickel.
Tom Pansella. Jim Quish.
And I'm Anthony Sutton, Vice Chairman, acting as acting Chairman this evening in the absence of Chairman Edward Mead. We are joined this evening by David Sulkus, our City Planner, and Phyllis Leggett, our Board Clerk. The first order of business on the agenda this evening is a public hearing left open, and it is for 110 Shelland Street, the petition of Raymond Macaluso for special permit and site plan review approval to create a contractor's outside storage and operations yard on map 51, block 936, parcels 17M and 17N, of which Malico Realty is the owner. Good evening, Mr. Macaluso.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and a Happy New Year to everyone. As requested, we did meet with the neighbors in reference to the proposed development of 110 Shelland Street. We had met with both property owners, one on Partridge Lane, that's the Mr. and Mrs. Chicos, and Mr. and Mrs. Abe on Tranquility. You heard their comments. Their basic concerns was the dust, the noise, everything that goes along with the process of having a contractor's yard about a residential area. So what we looked at the berm that we had proposed, and before you is still the same plan that we had a 6-foot high berm, 35 feet in width, running the whole portion of the back property, which now we extended that berm. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I have revised drawings that I'd like to pass out to the commission, and we could discuss it. Mr. Chairman, what we did initially, we had 31 evergreen trees in our initial proposal. And now what we're doing is we are, after meeting the neighbors and also taking the advice of Mr. Grant, we are adding an additional of 25 trees to the property. We're also adding a 6-foot berm, 120 linear feet, running on the northerly property line, which is over here. So what we have is we had the existing berm that we had proposed, I'm sorry, not the existing, but the proposed berm, and now we're adding an additional berm on Mr. Malico's property. When we met with the neighbors, we were trying to see if we could add additional trees on their property, but again, after looking at the site going there, and based on the elevations, we determined that it was in the best interest to extend this berm along the northerly portion and add approximately 11 evergreen trees in this berm, 6 foot high, 120 linear feet. Based on the sight lines, when I went to their property, looking at what would be in the best interest of the property owners, I felt that it would be putting this berm here, and they would have now more of a vegetation in lieu of having it down below in their property. We also, as I said, as Mr. Grant wanted, we added more screening all the way around. So we're adding 25 additional trees. We're still maintaining the site as we had talked about for a contractor's yard. The material right now that's down there is it's all compacted. As far as the dust and everything, there shouldn't be any dust from the existing site because it's all compacted, it's all millings, it's all paved, it's all asphalt pretty much. And his operation would be to have the bins filled with different materials and again, have the water truck on board. His operation would continue to be as we had presented. We did talk about reducing the hours on Sunday, but we never came to an agreement with the neighbors on that. So we're trying to, again, we have an HDD zone abutting a residential property. This area here, right back here, is all city property. It's 110 linear feet from this property line to the back of the property line on Partridge, and I'll show you an aerial. Mr. Malaco's property is right over here. This is Partridge over here. And this row of trees was put in by the power company. But you could see there's no vegetation between the row of trees and the property owner's property. That is city-owned property. There's no trees there, but that's city. Mr. Malaco did not take those trees down. So you have 110 feet, of which you have about 90 linear feet with no trees. So this area here is all open, which should have been all open space, meaning should be trees. So yes, dust, everything, but if there were trees here, then that would also be a prevention for the neighbors on Partridge to have some sort of vegetation along here. So this row of trees, you can see the green, the very dark area, that again was put in by the power company. So Mr. Malaco is definitely taking care of his property. We're definitely putting in the berm as we had discussed, if approved. Again, a 6 foot high running along the property line and then running the northerly end as far as we could go because again, there's rock, there's everything else that we cannot build an entire berm, but we will construct it 120 linear feet down. So again, it's revised, and that's our new proposal, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sulkus, do you have a comment on the revised petition?
Not at this time.
Do any members of the board have questions for the petitioner?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz?
Will the berm and the tree planting and all the work that you're discussing be done prior to operations?
We could agree to that, yes. We could put the berm in with all the trees, and the operation is there. There's not going to be any movement of material as far as clearing the site. It's already cleared. But as far as putting the berm in, yes, he could go in and construct that berm and put in the trees.
Thank you.
Are there further questions for the petitioner? Mr. Quish.
So what we're seeing here on the overview map there's how many acres of city-owned property that's just grassland?
That's 10 acres that goes along Partridge and then along Bick Drive. So you have 110 linear feet from the property line to property line, of which about 60 linear feet is taken out in this area.
And that was cleared at some point by this?
At some point, not by
Right.
Mr. Malico, that was cleared prior to. You could see this area was taken in 2013. You could see vehicles are parked there. You could see that it's cleared. And you could see the demarcation of the trees that were put in by the power company.
So that if there was an issue, we could probably work out how to put some trees up in that area as well?
Absolutely, but not by Mr. Malico. It should be by the people who took those trees down along Partridge. He had nothing to do with the trees along that area.
Right, but now it's city-owned property.
It is city-owned property.
And so you had discussions with the neighbors. Did you discuss each of the neighbors along the street, or?
I had, again, discussions with Mr. Chico's and Mr. and Mrs. Abe over here, two different issues, and we met separately. We didn't meet together. I did go personally last week and met with Mrs. Abe on her property. She allowed me to come on the property. She invited me into the house. I stood on the deck, and that's where I came up with the proposed revision in front of you to hopefully have some sort of demarcation and prevent obstruction.
And would you say that those meetings were productive and found that your revised plan met the approval of these folks that you spoke with?
I could honestly say, Mr. Quish, I thought they were productive. They did not agree 100%. They had to think about it. They had to get back. Mr. and Mrs. Chico's does not have an attorney. I spoke to Attorney Mongillo, who represents the Abes, and they didn't give me any indication that they agreed or didn't agree. But it was a very productive meeting, very cordial meeting, very professional meeting, and I had no issues.
Mr. Quish.
And just a question to either you or to staff. Are we allowed to hear from the neighbors at this point to find out what their feelings are with regard to the proposed changes?
Mr.
Yeah,
Sulkus?
yeah,
The public hearing's still open.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Nichol?
My questions were already asked. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there further questions for the petitioner? Mr. Marlowe?
Just, I know you had said that you were going to put the berm and trees in place beforehand. Does that mean no operations will take place until that time? Because I'm assuming we're talking spring to do that?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Marlowe, that's correct, but I would respectfully request that my client have the approval to do some operations. He hasn't done anything to move any dirt or anything, but that would be the first step. And again, based on the permit and your approval and stipulations, that would be number one. And then he would have to have us produce an as-built showing that all the accommodations that we propose were completed, and also guarantee those trees for 1 year from the time of planting.
Are there further questions from the board for the petitioner? Seeing none at this time, I'd like to reopen the public hearing for public comment. Just briefly to go over again the rules of our procedure. Whether you're speaking in favor of the petition or against the petition, I would ask that when you approach the podium, you please state your name clearly and spell your last name and provide your address. Please address all of your comments to the commission and not the petitioner, and please keep your comments as clear and succinct as possible. I encourage everyone to keep their comments under 3 minutes in the event that there are many people that wish to speak. I don't think there are. But if you wish to speak more than 3 minutes, you can certainly come back after everyone who wishes to speak has had the opportunity to do so. That said, is there anyone that wishes to speak in favor of the petition at this time? Seeing none, I'll ask anyone that wishes to speak in opposition to the petition to come forward.
Good evening. Attorney Jennifer Mongello, Mongillo. I represent Mr. and Mrs. Abe of 64 Tranquility Lane.
Counselor, if I can just ask that you put the microphone more in front of you.
Down. Is that better? Okay. I do want to say thank you to Attorney Smith and Mr. Calaruso because they have been certainly tried to help come to an agreement. The trees in the berm are certainly an additional help to blocking the view that my clients currently have right now, which is just straight through to the operations. Unfortunately, it's going to take several years to grow in, and even with that growth, we're not sure if that's going to be adequate. We never addressed anything on the times. I know that my clients as well as other neighbors were requesting that there was going to be no operations during the weekend, at the very least on Sundays. Once again, the concerns come back to compliance. Even if this was approved as is, they're stating that they're going to work from 7 to 7. Well, there was a cease and desist order, as you know, issued in April, which has never been complied with. 5:30 in the morning on Wednesday of last week, which would be, I believe, the 28th, a dumpster was dropped off onto the property, which was loud, woke up my clients, shook their whole house. So they have concerns that Mr. Malika is even going to comply with what he states he's going to do in his petition. Never mind what even with those agreements, what that's going to do. Unfortunately, I think that what Mr. Malika is proposing and what my client's concerns are just going to be at odds. There's still nothing there are in the application. There's no restrictions on what kind of trucks, excavators, loaders, what kind of equipment is going to be on the property. All of that's loud, all of that's noisy, the constant beeping, as well as I said before, dropping these dumpsters off. There's no limitations on any of the materials that are going to be on the property. There has been huge clouds of dust. And I think that the biggest barrier to any kind of agreement has been any accountability on the part of Mr. Malika. He's continued to work beyond the cease and desist order and continued to work beyond even what he's proposing he wants to do here. So unfortunately, my clients can't support it. They still aren't able to enjoy their home without the noise, without the mess. And that's where we stand for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Mongillo. Does anyone else wish to speak in opposition to the petition?
Hi, Sharon Chicos, 20 Partridge Lane. Yes, we did meet with Mr. Macaluso, my husband and I, and Wynn Smith, and we met basically on 3 different topics. The berm and the trees is one topic, and we came to an agreement, and that's what you presented, which we are in agreement to. But then we also talked about no Sunday operation, and I thought that's what we both agreed to. And now I'm hearing we didn't come to an agreement. Well, we thought we did. So, and then the third issue was the power washing. Never got an answer on that. So, unless those 2 other things can be resolved, the Sunday operation and the power washing, I'm not in favor of this project. So, I don't think it's a lot to ask, but it's those 2 things that will impact our property immensely. And as far as removing any trees on the Partridge Lane property, we've been there since 1999, and there were never any trees there to remove. So that open space was open. So, and that's why the power plant placed those trees in that location. They made the plan to place those there. We didn't. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anyone else wish to be heard in opposition to the petition at this time? Seeing none, Mr. Macaluso, you have the opportunity to rebut the public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as Attorney Mangello's comments, we did talk to our client about Sunday operations and also the Chico's request. Again, he would be willing to go from 10 to 3 on Sunday. On occasion, he may have opportunity to do some work. It's not going to be a steady diet. So we would revise the hours of operation from 10 to 3 on Sunday. Again, that is something, again, we did not agree on one way or the other, I have to say, but we did talk to our client and he would be receptive to that. As far as the dust, again, there's no dust. This property has mounds and mounds of fill, and it's overgrown. If you go there, he's not moving any dirt. As far as the dumpster coming on site at 5:30 in the morning, our client can't speak on that. I don't know if it's another contractor dropping it off or not dropping it off, but our client's machinery has been sitting there, has not been moved. The dust is not coming from his property. Again, there's another piece of property going to the southwest that may be the people that are causing the dust. But this particular property, if you go out there, it's all the milling and pavings on the road, on the whole area are completely compacted. There are mounds, but they are not dust that would be going into airborne. As far as the equipment, as far as the, keeping to a certain limitation of his vehicles, he's a contractor. It's a contractor storage yard in an HDD zone. That's allowed by a special permit. That's why we're here. As far as the beeping, that's a federal and state law. He can't stop it. As far as the operations, it's a contractor's yard. I don't know how much more we could do or say. He will control the operations. Again, Attorney Smith and I have talked to our client, and he assured us he has not been doing any operations, moving dirt or anything, or starting those vehicles. And I could personally say it doesn't look like it to my observation during my site visits. And again, Mr. Chairman, I think we would be receptive to looking at the hours of operation that would be in agreement to both parties, not to stop him from doing his job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Macaluso. Mr. Sulkus, does this board have the authority in granting or denying, or if we were to grant this special permit, to place restrictions on the hours of operation?
You can approve something, you can deny something, and you can modify something. So yes, you can provide limitations as you see fit.
So the board has the opportunity then to make a motion for approval with conditions, one of which can be items such as the hours of operation. How about the power washing? Would that be a condition that could be imposed by this board?
Your limitations to what you can do are things related to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Power washing, I'm not sure that's for the health, safety, or welfare of the community. It's obviously a desire of somebody, but I don't know that you can actually order that.
Thank you, Mr. Sulkus. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak in follow-up rebuttal to Mr. Macaluso's remarks at this time? Seeing none, we will close the public comment portion of the hearing. Does the board have any additional questions for the petitioner or Mr. Sulkus at this time? Mr. Quish.
Yes, to staff, just as a clarification, what use can this property have without any special permit, just as a right of use?
I'd have to open up my book to look. Most of the industrial districts have very few as-of-right uses. Everything is by special permit. Having said that, I should open the book and I can go through them if you'd like. Do you want me to do that? Oh.
Thank you, Mr. Selkis.
Okay. As of right uses per site plan approval are any building or use as permitted and regulated in the industrial district. So I'd have to go to the industrial district. I could read those off. And then they have what are called special uses in this zone. And there's a list of those things as well. So if you'd like, I will go over to the other page and read. Okay, by right, in the HDD, you can do manufacturing, fabricating, assembling, or processing of goods or repair services. You can have building equipment, merchandise, material, and supply businesses. You can have offices for business, financial, professional, and professional services or similar uses. You can have computer centers, scientific or research laboratories, printing and publishing establishments, metalworking and other similar shops and repair services, vocational training schools, principal warehousing and wholesale business uses, public utility buildings and facilities, off-street parking garages and lots, eating places, mixed-use buildings. And now we get to special uses, which brings me back to our section. And by special uses, you can have any building or use and regulated in the industrial district, but not including principal trucking terminals. You can have boat clubs, marinas, boatyards, hotels.
Thank you. That's good.
That's good, okay.
Yeah. No, my point is that if we were to deny this, we did not render this piece of property without value. There's many uses for this property that could be less intrusive on the neighbors. When you hear somebody's getting woken up in their house shaking at 5 in the morning, that seems to be egregious. You know, it seems to really take away the fundamental right of enjoyment of a property that you've had and lived in. So that's an issue for me.
Are there any further questions for Mr. Moore?
Quick question to staff. In regards to the petitioner being compliant for any services or work being done on the property at this time, is there any documentation from administration? Or does that even weigh into our vote tonight?
All I can tell you is that we initially sent a notice of violation to the applicant when the work had initially begun, and that's what brought them to the office to seek their special permit. We've been told on multiple occasions by representatives of the Malicos that no work is taking place. We're aware of and are investigating some work that is taking place on property that's next to Mr. Malico's, which may be the source of some of the dust complaints.
Thank you.
Are there additional questions for Mr. Selkis or the petitioner at this time?
Yes.
Mr. Lutz.
Again, what are the agreed upon hours of operation? Mr. Malik.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Lutz, again, it's in your packet. We had hours of operation Monday through Friday, 7 to 7, I believe. Operation on Saturday, it was going to be 7 to 5, and then we had 7 to 3 on Sunday, but we're willing to, again, our client is willing to cut it back to, on Sunday, 10 to 3 on occasion. He does have to come in to prepare for the week or whatever. It's not going to be, not in his comments, not a steady diet on Sunday, but he would like to have that Monday through Saturday.
The other question I have is, we talked about the city-owned property. How close are the houses to the property in question? In other words, that's
110 feet.
110 feet. So in other words, the closest house would be 110 feet.
110 feet to his property line. Correct. And this is the city open space, but it is 110 feet from their property line to Mr. Maliko's. The other property on Tranquility is a lot closer, but again, we're going to have that buffer. Their property is right about here, which was just recently purchased by Mr. D'Amato. But this would be all bermed, and again, you could see that we would have a buffer down in this area. Their house is right about here, looking, and it's probably, I'm going to say, roughly to the property line. They're adjacent to the property line right here. This is their property line. It does abut Mr. Maliko's property.
Mr. Macaluso, it might be easier to have both those drawings oriented the same way. So either change the one on the bottom or the one on the top. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sulkus, for your advice.
Do you think, second question, do you think that the Malikos would be willing to, if the city was willing to allow it, would they be willing to plant some trees in that open area that's owned by the city?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Lutz, I don't believe he would be. I believe he's, again, putting in the additional trees on his property. He did not take those trees down. He has nothing to do with this property back here. And again, there is a buffer with white pines that were put in by the power company. Their enjoyment, the city property. They're using that city property. You can see there's vehicles and everything parked on it, all right, 3 years ago. But they have this is all open space now. There's no trees. It's open. So I don't think Mr. Maliko would be willing to do that. He's willing to do what he has to do, but I don't think he'd go that far.
Thank you, Mr. Macaluso. Are there additional questions? Mr. Nichol.
I heard from Mrs. Chicos out there, and she said 1999 that there was an open space. In that length of time, either someone was maintaining that space, cutting stuff down, otherwise you'd have a forest growing in there. So somebody over there is keeping that space open. Whoever cut it down wants to keep it open. So I think it's up to the neighbors to replant it.
Are there additional questions for the petitioner or staff at this time? Seeing none, does anyone see any reason as to why we should not close the public hearing at this time? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. At this point, we have the option of taking this matter to a vote if someone wishes to propose a motion, or the matter could be tabled for consideration and determination at the next meeting of the board.
I'd like to
wish to be heard on that. Mr. Lutz.
I'll put forward a motion.
Go right ahead.
I would like to put a motion to approve the application with the following conditions: that the applicants will have no operations there until the berm and the plantings are complete, and that they maintain the schedule of operations: Sunday 10 to 3, Saturday 7 to 5, Monday through Friday, 7 to 7.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Mr. Grant. Does anyone wish to be heard on the motion? Mr. Quish.
Yeah, I understand there's compromise, and the conversation that happened is always a good thing. I still think that it's an undue burden on the neighbors. 7 o'clock in the morning is awfully early if you don't have to get up, you have kids. 7 at night if you're home, and all of a sudden there's, heavy equipment rolling around, dumpsters coming and going. I think that is a substantial disturbance of, the ability of the neighbors to enjoy their homes. I could support, a later start, 8 and 5 o'clock, weekday operation, and maybe that weekend at the 10 to 3. I understand that it's a contractor's world and the contractor's hours are outside of that, but, somehow putting a gate to make sure that there's not a random dumpster coming in at 5 in the morning might be smart, but I would advocate for something that would get buy-in from the neighbors. Where I know there's been an attempt, and I respect and appreciate that. I don't really feel like we're getting everybody on board and everybody happy. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Quish. Does anyone else wish to be heard relative to the motion as presented? Mr. Nichol.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jim, to a certain respect, but Shetland Road or Shetland Street is surrounded by industry, heavy industry. Right up the street you have Pedowitz Heavy Rigging Company, which uses Shetland to get out to the turnpike. You have your utility companies up and down that street that certainly start before 7 o'clock in the morning if they have to go and do things. So, and then you have the Plains Road warehouses down there, which are small business operators, and they certainly don't abide by a 7 to 7. They come in and they work as they need fit. So, yes, I say that if someone down the street drops a dumpster in the middle of the road, you're going to hear it for a half mile away, but I don't go along with you.
Thank you, Mr. Nichol. Is there further comment on the motion? Mr. Lutz.
Yes. I don't like to see people disturbed unnecessarily, but when you buy a property next to a long-established industrial area, there's things I think that you have to expect. The other thing I would think is if the neighbors see someone cutting grass or maintaining that property, they should report it right away, because I agree with Mr. Nichols. If you just leave the property alone, it'll be a forest in a very short time period. There's no way in the state of Connecticut that you could have not trees and all kinds of things growing there over all those years unless somebody is doing something there. So I think that if people will just leave the property alone, it'll fill in and give you that much more of a buffer.
Is there further comment on the motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question to a vote. All in favor of Mr. Lutz's motion to approve with conditions? All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda this evening are liaison reports. Are there any liaison reports this evening? Mr. Nichol.
Yeah, I haven't reported on my inland wetland liaison, but I want to tell you they do a hell of a job over there. I've attended just about every meeting. The most prominent one was with the Grillo property and the affordable housing, and I assure you that inland wetland took them over their hurdles, and for them to approve it was something that was commendable. So I have been representing us at these meetings.
Thank you, Mr. Nichol. That is very much appreciated. Are there any additional liaison reports this evening? Seeing none, we'll move to the Regulations Subcommittee. Mr. Grant, do you have a report this evening?
Yes, we met today. We had a very productive meeting. At our next meeting, we'll have a couple of regulation items to submit to the board for review.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. The next item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for December 20th. That will be taken up at our January 17th meeting. The next item on the agenda is the Chair's report. As acting chair this evening, I have no report. The next item on the agenda is the staff report. Mr. Sulkus, do you have a report this evening?
Not this evening.
That concludes our agenda. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Mr. Marlowe, is there a second? Mr. Grant, we stand adjourned.